Hello and welcome to the Let It Ride podcast, coming at you to preview the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. As always, I'm your host, Jeffrey Hooks, coming to you for the second time in video form. Last week, the Let It Ride podcast made its debut on YouTube, and thanks to those additional YouTube views, last week's episode was the most listened to episode in the history of the Let It Ride podcast. So I want to thank all the new viewers for helping us reach that milestone, and hopefully welcome back. Hopefully all those new viewers are watching again this week. The divisional round, this is where the big boys come to play. This is where the great teams separate themselves. A little bit of an interesting note on the AFC teams. All four AFC teams who made the divisional round last year are back this year. So the Texans, Chiefs, Ravens, Bills all made it last year. They're all back yet again. On the other side for the NFC, only the Detroit Lions are returning from last year's divisional round. And it's kind of been that way for the last 2+ decades in the NFL. We've seen the AFC dominated by these stud quarterbacks, and we've seen a lot of parity in the NFC. You can go back to the late 2000s, early 2010s. There was a 16-year stretch where 14 of the 16 AFC Super Bowl appearances were made by either Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, or Ben Roethlisberger. And you're going to see that same thing, I think, for at least the next decade in the AFC between Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow. It just looks like we're going to have another set of stud quarterbacks dominating the AFC for the next decade plus. And unfortunately for Chargers fans, yet again, they have the guy that's on the outside looking in. If you go back to that Brady, Roethlisberger, Manning era, that was Phillip Rivers. He was the guy on the outside looking in. Now it's going to be Justin Herbert. Looks like he's going to be the guy on the outside looking in. So just an unfortunate thing for Chargers fans, kind of a long tortured franchise. You can go all the way back to the Don Coryell teams, Kellen Winslow, Dan Fouts, the Air Coryell offense, an offense that made me fall in love with studying the history of football. If you're not familiar with that, just look it up. The Air Coryell offense, modern offense, owes a tip of the cap to Don Coryell for his innovation. The seam route that you see to the tight end, he started that. That was Dan Fouts to Kellen Winslow. They were the first ones to do that. So look up the Air Coryell offense if you are interested in the history of football. But just a number of storied players. I mean, LaDainian Thomas and Phillip Rivers, that team, they, a 14-2 team that couldn't get to the Super Bowl. They're just a long, tortured franchise, and they always just seem to be that team that's left out. So unfortunate there. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Harbaugh and Justin Herbert can get it together and break through. But as of now, I really can't see anybody outside of those big four quarterbacks breaking through in the AFC. On the other side, it seems like we just have more parity in the NFC. I know the Lions look dominant right now, but there's a number of teams that, it wouldn't shock you to see make it out of the NFC. During that 16-year stretch that I talked about, 10 different NFC quarterbacks made Super Bowls in that stretch, and only two of those quarterbacks made multiple appearances in Russell Wilson and Eli Manning. So the NFC just has not had the dominant quarterback play that the AFC has had, and it looks like it's going to continue to be that way, at least for the foreseeable future. Just diving into last week for the wildcard round before we start to break down this week's games. Unders, 5-1 last week, and really should have been 6-0. Unfortunately for us, one of the picks I gave out last week was the only under that did not hit. That was in the Texans-Chargers game. Really a bad beat, though. I mean, we started out on the wrong foot with our picks. That was the first game of the weekend. Really looked like that game was going to go under with ease. It was 10-6 at halftime. Then a barrage of points in the second half, mainly off of Justin Herbert turnovers. But even with all those points, we really should have been fine with the under. But the Texans blocking an extra point and taking it back for 2 points, and those 2 points ended up being what pushed the game over. And so if Cameron Dicker just knows the rules of football, catches that block kick and falls down instead of batting it down, which I have no idea what he was doing, we're sitting here calling under 6-0, and we have another winner to celebrate from my picks last week. But that was not meant to be. So I wanted to break down why so many games went under last week. And I really think it was just a matter of bad quarterback play. I mean, you have guys like Russell Wilson, you have guys like Sam Darnold, like Bo Nix, who, they're average quarterbacks, but they're not up to par with some of these other guys, with the Lamars, with the Josh Allens. They're just not in the same stratosphere as these guys. So when you have these big mismatch games like this, you're just going to have games go under. So I think we see a little bit of regression to the mean. So that's why we are keying in on some overs this week. Not necessarily in every game, but definitely think that we're going to see more points scored this week. When you go through the quarterbacks that we're going to see this week, you have Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jared Goff, Jaden Daniels, Matthew Stafford, Jalen Hurts. I mean, those are 8 of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL right now. So we're going to get much better quarterback play than we got last week. I think we're going to see more points being scored than we did last week. So like I said, we are going to key in on some overs, and we're going to start with the Texans and the Chiefs. The Chiefs, an 8.5-point favorite at home. The over-under sitting at 41.5. This is a rematch of a game from Week 16 that the Chiefs won 27-19. Now, I like the Chiefs in this game. I think they are going to win. But if you look at that Week 16 game, they were a 3.5-point favorite in that game. Now they're an 8.5-point favorite. I just can't get with laying an extra 5 points than I had to lay in Week 16. So I'm staying away from that. I also can't really get with this over because you could see the Texans, they've laid some duds on the road. C.J. Stroud is proven to be a much better quarterback at home than he has been on the road. We saw that game on the road against the Ravens where the offense didn't score any points. It was a 31-2 final score. The only 2 points the Texans scored in that game were on a safety. But we also saw C.J. Stroud actually hold his own against this Chiefs defense in their previous matchup. They put up 19 points. So I really don't know which version of the Texans I'm getting, but I do know which version of the Kansas City Chiefs I'm getting. You look at the Kansas City Chiefs, their last 5 divisional playoff games, they are 5-0 straight up, and all 5 of those games have gone over. This offense is also getting healthy. Isaiah Pacheco is back. Hollywood Brown is back. You also get the return of playoff Travis Kelce. I know Travis Kelce kind of slogs his way through the regular season, but he's proven to be a different player in the playoffs. Same for Patrick Mahomes. A lot of people are talking about, oh, he's had a down year. His numbers weren't that great, but we all know that Patrick Mahomes steps it up when it comes to the playoffs. And we really saw it happen their last couple of games of the year. Now, you could throw out that game against the Broncos where they sat everybody. You could throw that game out. But the 2 games before that, they scored 27 points and 29 points in the 2 games that they needed to clinch the 1 seed in the AFC in Week 16, Week 17. So this offense is only scoring 22.6 points per game, but this offense is much better than that when it comes to playoff time. And you look at this Texans defense, they're allowing 27.5 points per game in the 6 games that they played against playoff teams this year. So this Texas defense, yes, they're very good, but when they step up in class, they do struggle a little bit. So rather than take the full game over, just because I'm not sure what I'm going to get from the Texans in this game, I'm going to take the Kansas City Chiefs team total over 23.5 and the Chiefs on the money line. You put those together, you get minus 120 right now on DraftKings. So that's going to be our play for this game. Kansas City to score at least 24 and win the game. I don't think we're asking for too much there. That is going to move us on to the Commanders on the Lions. The Lions, a 9.5-point favorite at home. The over-under sitting at 55.5. And this number is incredibly high, and it's not hard to see why. The Lions, first in the league in points per game. Washington is 5th. The Lions, second in the league in yards per game. Washington is 7th. Third downs, the Lions are 4th. The Commanders are 6th. So this is going to be a shootout, in my opinion, and that's why this game is sitting at 55.5, the highest total on the board. I think this Lions offensive line has a huge advantage against this Commanders team. The Lions offensive line, the best in the league, going up against the Commanders front that allows the 5th most yards per carry in the league. That is the worst among all playoff teams. So this rush defense can be got, and you're going up against a great offensive line and great back in Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, who's making his return for this game. So you have a fully healthy offense for the Lions with the return of Montgomery. They have the 6th best passing offense in the NFL, the 2nd best rushing offense in the NFL. So I think that's going to open up the play action. They're going to be able to get whatever they want against this Commanders defense. And you look at this Commanders defense, they closed the season okay. They played pretty well against the Bucs last week, but when they've played good offenses, they gave up 37 points to the Bucs all the way back in week 1, 33 points to the Bengals, 30 points to the Ravens, 31 points per game combined in their 2 matchups against the Eagles. So this defense does have some holes in it, and I think the Lions are going to be able to exploit that. But on the other side, I think this Detroit defense could be in some trouble too. I know we watched that blitz. The Detroit Lions love the blitz, and we watched that blitz stymie Sam Darnold that really laid the blueprint for the Rams. They were getting after him as well. Sam Darnold does not handle the blitz well. Jaden Daniels does handle the blitz well. He has his capability. He can escape the pocket. He can use his legs to create yards against the blitz. And you look at the 2 ways to throw the ball against the blitz in the NFL. It's either you got to throw it short and quick or you got to throw it deep. And those are 2 areas where Jaden Daniels excels. He loves throwing those moon balls deep, typically to Terry McLaurin, but he's also really good at checking it down, finding those receivers in the short passing game. So I think this Commanders offense is going to be able to put some points on the board as well. And we've watched this Detroit defense struggle with mobile quarterbacks. They gave up 48 points to Josh Allen a few weeks ago. So this is a team that really struggles against mobile quarterbacks. They're reliant on the blitz. I think Jaden Daniels is going to be able to hold his own in this game. Now, I do think the Lions do eventually win this game, but I think it's going to be a shootout. I think this is a 34-24 type of game. So give me the over 55.5 in this game. I know it's a really high total, but these are two great offenses and two suspect defenses. So I expect some fireworks in this game. That is going to move us on to the Rams taking on the Eagles. The Eagles, a 6-point favorite at home. The over-under sitting at 44. This is a rematch of a game we saw in Week 12 when the Eagles won 37-20. That, of course, was the game that Saquon Barkley had 300 yards from scrimmage. So we've seen this Eagles offensive line absolutely dominate this Rams team not that long ago. And is it weird to say that a team that won a playoff game by 18 points didn't look that impressive? I was not impressed with the Rams in their win over the Vikings. You look at the first two drives of that game, 13 plays, 142 yards, 6 first downs. They scored 10 points. The rest of the game, 38 plays, 150 yards, just 10 first downs the rest of that game. They won that game because Sam Darnold just handed it to them on a platter. They had that scoop and score that really put that game out of reach. They got a short field after he takes that awful sack on fourth down right before the half. Outside of that, the Rams offense didn't, outside of those two, the scoop and score, the short field, and the first two drives that I referenced, the Rams offense only put 3 points on the board. They were not impressive the rest of the game, and they really got a huge break. I don't care what anybody says. That was not a forward pass. Matthew Stafford's getting sacked, going to the ground, and he tries like a fake little option pitch to say, oh, I was throwing the ball. That should have been a fumble. That should have been a 10-10 game, and that game could have gone in a completely different direction. I just don't think this Rams team is in the same class as this Eagles team. Now, Jalen Hurts struggles. Yeah, they're noted. He did not play well last week. It was also his first game in a month after his concussion, so he might have just been shaking the rust off. And he really didn't put up a great stat line in the first game that these teams played. That the Eagles won 37-20. So I don't know that the Eagles even need a great performance from Jalen Hurts to beat this Rams team. They have the best offensive line in the league. They have the best pass defense in the league. They allow just 5.5 yards per pass attempt. And when you look at the Rams, they're heavily reliant on their passing attack. Tyler Higbee got hurt in that game, and there's a direct correlation to him going out of that game and the Rams offense really falling off a cliff. Now, they're saying that he's going to play, but he was in the hospital coughing up blood. I can't imagine that he's going to be the same for this game. And Cooper Kupp didn't really look like himself in that game either. So I don't trust this Rams offense. This Eagles defense, I think, is going to dominate. I think that this Eagles offensive line is going to dominate. Give me the Eagles -6. I really think Detroit and Philadelphia, they've been on a collision course all year, and I don't think anything is going to stop those two teams from meeting in the NFC Championship game. That is going to take us on to the final game, the creme de la creme, the marquee matchup. It is the Ravens. It is the Bills. It is a battle of MVP candidates, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. This is a matchup we saw in week 4. The Ravens dominated that game 36-10. But I'm not putting too much stock in that game. Number one, that game was in Baltimore. This game's in Buffalo. The Bills had played the previous Monday, so they're playing on short rest. And the Ravens were 1-2 coming into that game. The Bills were 3-0. The Ravens were just a much more desperate team in that game. You also had a Bills defense that was banged up. They were down Matt Milano and a number of other guys in that game. So I'm not putting too much stock into that game. I'm also not putting any stock into people saying that both of these quarterbacks struggle in the playoffs. For Josh Allen, he actually doesn't struggle in the playoffs. Losing to Patrick Mahomes doesn't mean that you struggle. In 11 playoff games, Josh Allen has 3,000 yards passing, 23 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 609 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns. He puts up amazing numbers in the playoffs just because he comes up short against Patrick Mahomes. That doesn't mean he's a bad playoff quarterback. He's really only had one bad playoff performance that came at home against Cincinnati a couple of years ago. If you look at the numbers, Josh Allen is actually one of the best postseason performers in the history of the NFL. In fact, in the 2022 playoffs, his 95 QBR is the highest QBR in a single postseason by a quarterback. So Josh Allen does not struggle. Don't listen to that narrative. On the other side, though, Lamar Jackson, some of the criticism is a little bit more valid, but he has had absolutely no help in the playoffs. Up until last week, in his previous 6 playoff games, he never had a running back go for more than 70 yards. He's not going to have that problem with Derrick Henry as his backfield mate. So I think Derrick Henry is just unlocking the offense for Lamar. He's opening things up, taking a lot of pressure off of him as well. You go back to last year, when everybody was getting on the Ravens, why didn't they run the ball against the Chiefs? They were the best running team in the league, and they just abandoned the run. Lamar Jackson carried the ball 8 times for 56 yards. The rest of the team had 8 carries for 38 yards. So he was getting no help in the run game. That's not going to be a problem now that he has Derrick Henry next to him. like I said, he takes the pressure off him. He opens up the options. It opens up the field for Lamar Jackson. He's throwing against more stacked boxes. Now, the absence of Zay Flowers does concern me for Baltimore. In fact, it's probably the only reason I'm not taking Baltimore in this game. If Zay Flowers is playing, I'm probably taking Baltimore straight up in this game. But as it is, I just think both quarterbacks are going to come out and they're going to give MVP caliber performances because they are MVP caliber quarterbacks. I'm not going to sit here and argue which one should win MVP. One of them will, and it will be a deserved MVP, and it's no slight to the other guy. But I think you're going to get great performance from both of these guys. So I'm just going to take the over. I don't want to be sweating aside on this game because I could see either team winning it. I just want to sit back, watch the two best quarterbacks in the league this year go up against each other, and I want to root for some points. So give me the over 51. It's 51.5 in some spots. You can find a 51 in the market. I got a 51 at BetMGM this morning, and even 51.5, it's juice. So you're only having to lay minus 105 if you take the 50.5. But we're going to take the 51 that we found at BetMGM. And just because I like to give out 5 picks on every podcast, if you're just joining us for the last couple of YouTube episodes, throughout the year, I always gave out my 5 best bets through each week. Of course, last week with the wild card round, wanted to break down every game. We ended up giving out 6, but this week only 4 games. So I want to have a 5th play to get on record, number 1, to try to improve the record last week. 2-4 on the picks last week, so want to improve on that. So give us ourselves another bullet in the chamber here. We are taking a money line parlay. Like I said, this is when the big boys come to play. There have been 5 teams this year that have had a real chance to win the Super Bowl: the Ravens, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Lions, the Eagles. I would be shocked, absolutely shocked, if it's not 4 of those 5 teams in the conference championship games next week. So throw out the Baltimore-Buffalo game, which, like I said, I can't call a side on. We're just going to take the other 3 favorites, the Eagles, the Lions, the Chiefs, all on the money line. That pays out at minus 106. So the picks this week, we're taking a 3-leg parlay: Chiefs, Lions, Eagles, money line, minus 106. Don't care how square it is. I can't see it happening. I can't see any of those 3 teams losing. So I know it's square. Don't care. We're taking it. Chiefs, Lions, Eagles, money line, minus 106. Ravens, Bills, over 51. Eagles, minus 6 against the Rams. Commanders, Lions, over 55.5. And Chiefs team total over 23.5, coupled with the Chiefs win. Those are the picks, and that is the podcast. Thank you to everybody for listening and tuning in, and I will see you guys next week.